Can you communicate without words? Is there any form of communication that does not involve words? Yes, there is a form of communication wherein, even without speaking a word, you can communicate your message. You can express what you think. You can communicate non verbally. And that is what we are going to learn in this two-part video series. So, we do communicate at times with words. These are called non-verbal communication. Now, communication is verbal and non-verbal. Verbal means when we make it clear through our words, but non-verbal communication has a lot of things attached to it overall, and it is performed without words. Now, many of the anthropologists say that 35% is verbal communication and 65% is non-verbal communication. One eminent anthropologist has said that 7% is verbal, 38% vocal, and 55% non-verbal. So it's more than half of your communication is non-verbal. So non-verbal cues have a very important role to play in the completion of communicative process. So let us understand what is non-verbal communication. It is communicating without words, communicating through non-verbal symbols. It has more impact. As I've already said, more than half of the communication is non-verbal, even if you're using words to talk to a person. Now, we all know that when we communicate on computer or on a mobile, most of the times we do not use verbal communications. We use icons, we use symbols. And these symbols and icons come to use when we chat online. But when you communicate through non-verbal symbols, these symbols can be numberless. It is very difficult to calculate or to have an estimation of these non-verbal cues. But one study says that there are more than 6 lakh non-verbal cues. There are 6 lakhs ways non-verbally you can communicate your message across. So non-verbal cues or non-verbal cannot be a substitute to a verbal communication. For example, if you use a word like silence, you use a word like happiness, that cannot be substituted. But at the same time, when you use the word happiness, you find that sort of reaction, expression, emotion, and suddenly the happiness appears on your face, so you cannot hide it. So, non-verbal communication has got more impact and is more spontaneous. It's very difficult for us to pose for happiness if you're not happy from within. So the reality, the truth, the feelings, the emotions comes on your face. So to understand the implication of non-verbal cues in order to meet a business deal, in order to have a business transaction, in order to understand people, you will realize that whenever you become angry, you actually do not tend to become angry. You actually do not decide to become angry. For example, when a person is sad, he does not decide to be sad. Of course, from the inside, he is sad, and that is why it appears and resurfaces on his face. So, what is the importance of non-verbal communication? The first is it is unintentional. You cannot hide anything when you are communicating non-verbally. Everything comes naturally. Non-verbal communication supplements the verbal communications. It is spontaneous. and it is not structured. Non-verbal messages have two levels. Now, we will talk about these two levels later. Now, the way we choose words, the way we convey our message, it is complemented and supplemented by the feeling which comes on our face. So, non-verbal message or non-verbal communication actually works at two levels. The first is at the verbal level, that is the word, and the second is the non-verbal level. We all have certain personality. We all have a particular nature, which we cannot change as per the requirement of the communication because that is inherent, that is natural. So, today we will see how certain non verbal messages appear and how a particular word becomes important in order to read those non verbal messages. So, most of you, while you are participating in an interview or a conference or a group discussion, you will find that people sitting are always alive. There is not a single moment of time when they are not communicating. Even if a person is not speaking, he is listening to the others in the group and he's communicating in his own way, whether he agrees or not. You can see that on his facial expressions. As I said earlier, these non-verbal cues, which are 6 lakhs in numbers, are very difficult to have all of them at one go. But then, if we can recognize and categorize, we can make our work even more easier. So, what are different types of non-verbal communications? Now, I will discuss all these types of non-verbal communications in the later part of video series, which is the soft skill series. And here you will learn how different aspects of non-verbal communication will help you to become a better person. So let me talk in brief about all of them. Kinesis, first non-verbal communication. Proxemics, chronomics, paralanguage, haptics, meta communication. We will talk about each of them in detail in a separate video series. Now let me give you a brief understanding about all these aspects of nonverbal communication. The first is kinesis. Now kinesis refers to the body language. Now when we communicate, we actually use three languages. The first is sign language, which is a type of stereotype, the behavior. Then the other is action language, the way your body behaves, the language which you use. These are the two things. And the third one is the object language, the way the person makes his communication, the way the person speaks. So kinesis is the first and the most important thing. Now the second is proxemics. Now what is proxemics? It actually deals with the distance. How much distance two people should have when they are talking to each other. That is proxemics. Now, since we are living in a multicultural world, in a globalized world wherein we need to communicate and understand the culture, the language, and the way people behave in a particular situation, especially the foreigners, we need to understand that there is a science, there is a subject, there is an there is an institutional mechanism through which you need to understand the level and the amount of distance which you need to maintain when you are communicating. Then come chronomics, which is importance of time, paralanguage, which is even more important, haptics, the study of touch. Now we talk about a language, of course, but when you talk about language, you talk about words. We talk about how words are spoken and how these words are presented. Haptics is related to touch, which you will find in one of my earlier videos in soft skills playlist. I have already made a video on it. You can go through it. Since you never know whose touch will generate what sort of feeling and how people feel when they are touched, you should know and you should understand this topic, haptics. It's very important. As I've already discussed, the word kinesis is related to movement of body and how your overall body moves when you speak to the other person. So he who has eyes to see and ears to hear can convince that there is no mortal which can be kept as a secret. If his lips are silent, he chats with his fingertips. Betrayal oozes out of him at every pore. This phrase was given by a famous philosopher, Sigmund Freud. It is not only the words that he speaks, but it is very important that the person speaker should look at the person to whom he is speaking, the audience. Many times you will find that the presentation which is being made by the person is very good, but the way he is communicating that presentation becomes boring because he does not have effective communication skills. So, most of the times, the people will find the topics uninteresting, but there is nothing uninteresting. The people are uninteresting. And why? Because depends upon the speaker who is giving the lecture, who is making the presentation. So the people who are having eyes and ears, they can well assure that we cannot keep a secret. So if you cannot deliver a lecture well, the people will definitely express in one form or the other. So when you make a presentation, your body will deliver the confidence, the level of preparation which you have already made. Even when you are silent, you are communicating. If you go to deliver a talk, if you go to become a participant in a meeting, whatsoever, even though you may not say anything, you may be silent, but at the same time, your silence has a meaning. By kinesis, of course, we mean the body language. Our body speaks, our body behaves. Now, what are different forms of kinesis? Personal appearance, facial expressions, eye contact, posture, gesture. All these comprises kinesis. Now, personal appearance is the face, the the way you look. As we all know, the face is the index of mind. What you feel within comes on your face. So a false face must have a false heart within. You should also realize that even though the face is index of the mind, it is actually what you feel within will come out on your face. You cannot hide your emotions. Now, eyes also speak volumes. When you speak to a person, your eyes expresses your feelings, your thoughts, your emotions. That's why eye contact. Men trust their ears less than their eyes. It is the window of the soul. Eyes reflect sincerity and indicate your emotion. It establishes goodwill and creates rapport. That is the importance of eyes. Gestures. These are the movements of hands, your arms and shoulders, your torso. How confident you are, how well prepared you are. Your gesture will express that. So make sure that your gestures, your hand movements are perfect. The way your body moves expresses your feeling. So if your hands are wringing, this means you are in tension, you are discomfort. If you are clenching in with your hands, it's uncertainty. If you have covered your hands, it is insecurity. If you have open hands, it means trust, interest. These are the non-verbal messages which you express when you talk to the other person. Crossing the arms is a negative attitude. Arms and legs crossed, attentive, double-handed handshake, intimacy. Dead fish handshake, formality, glove handshake, politicians handshake. Now, these are very simple body language uh, tips which you can always find and observe when you communicate with people.